here so that we can distribute this afterwards for everyone's reference. All right, so let's jump in. Laura, do you want to give us kind of a brief introduction? Tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure, happy to do so. Hi, everyone. I hope the spring semester is off to an okay start for you. I definitely empathize with kind of first week of the semester jitters if you're feeling those. So, my name's Laura Evers, pronouns she, her. I'm a 6-year PhD candidate in English literature here at WashU. Our program is 6 years in length, and so I am on the job market, which is about as fun as you probably imagine, especially for those of you who might also be on the job market right now. And as Kyle mentioned, I am a career peer coach at the Center for Career Engagement. I've been working at the center for a little bit over maybe 2.5 years at this point. I really enjoy it. I love the workshops and I really enjoy the one-on-one coaching sessions where I get to chat with folks like yourselves, PhD students, postdocs, also working with a lot of alumni who come back to our center. And so it's just been a really great way to get to know people across the university in addition to completing my program. So very happy to be here with all of you. And I know, so I recognize some of you. I'm looking at your names. So we have a lot of very ambitious students and postdocs in this session too. So hopefully we can get to leverage some of your insight and hard work as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. So I have a list of like questions and discussion topics for us here.
Great.
But I encourage you all who are attending to drop questions into the chat as they come up. You know, we really want to make sure we get you get the most out of this and we get whatever it is that you're hoping to learn out of this session as well. Um, but can you like start off a bit by telling us like just so we can get to all get to know each other, what was your original like motivation for pursuing a PhD?
Sure. It's a great
And has that
question.
changed, I should ask too, over time, or is it still the same?
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. It's a great question, and it's a question I really like to ask in like coaching sessions too, because the answers are so varied and fascinating. So for me specifically, when I was an undergrad, I was a history and sociology major. I had no desire to continue on. I always have really admired folks who got their bachelor's and were like, yes, I want more. I did not. And so I spent the majority of my 20s avoiding academia. However, in retrospect, I wasn't really avoiding it. So a lot of my work was in education technology, working with higher education clients. And so it was always in like the peripheral of my vision. And I decided in my late 20s, I was working for an education technology company. And I was really thinking about what I enjoyed about that role. And it was interfacing with people in academia. And that kind of led me to think, okay, well, I'm interested, maybe I'm really genuinely interested in academia as a thing. I've been kind of teaching off and on. And so what wound up happening is I just went and got my master's. I did a fully funded master's in English, still not thinking that uh, pursuing a PhD was on my radar by any stretch. But it was that master's program that really made me feel like I had found my people. It sounds a little cheesy, but I felt like I had found my calling. And then from there, I continued on into a PhD program. I will say that entering the PhD program, I knew the job market was difficult and challenging. So I wasn't 100% like, oh, I want to be a professor. Of course, as as we all do, we study, we research, we write, we're in the lab. I certainly have sort of grappled with what kind of job opportunities to look for. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this session. But the point really being that I did not initially think that this was something that I wanted to be doing, and here I am, and now I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Well, and you've thrown yourself at it, you know, wholeheartedly, based on all of the different kinds of things you've done. So diving a bit into that, can you tell
Yeah.
us about just some of the professional development opportunities, scholarships, fellowships, you know, things like that that you've received as a PhD student.
Sure, definitely. I will give a couple examples, and then within those examples, I also want to emphasize that these opportunities that I sought, for every one that I might have pursued or gotten, there's at least five, if not 10 rejections. So, I think we all kind of maybe intrinsically know that rejection is part of it, but just as I kind of talk about some of these opportunities, please know that there are many other things I applied for and failed to get, and those were equally, if not maybe more valuable learning opportunities, depending. I have a list, so forgive me. I'm just gonna um, pull up this Word document. So in terms of the one that I really have, oh gosh, there Wash U, what I will say is very well resourced. But what you might have discovered in your own time here at the university is some of those resources are very obvious, and there's like a streamlined application for how to pursue that opportunity. And then there are others that kind of are through word of mouth or are through you kind of asking to pursue something. So it's one of those situations where I think WashU is, yes, it's very well resourced, but there's a lot of sort of labor you have to do yourself to seek out other opportunities. And I do think there have been efforts. I know at the CCE, just one example of trying to kind of streamline and make those opportunities a little bit more readily available. But I just want to, highlight that. And so the one that I'll kind of talk a little bit about is a through the Center for Humanities, which some of you I know are familiar with, but it was a redefining a doctoral education curriculum innovation grant. And I'll give you an example. So when I applied, they basically had caps of about $5,000. But in terms of the development and the program that I was thinking about in partnership with the English department chair, we actually needed a little bit more money. And so I made a case for $8,000 and they gave us 8,000. And so that's just a very small sticks example of if you see something, whether it's a job, maybe a job posting wouldn't necessarily be the right space, but if it's an opportunity that's saying, we have this amount of money. It's okay to ask for more. Um, Especially at Wash U, they'll be very honest if they can't support you in that way. But don't ever, don't self-reject if you see something and you're like, oh, I need more or I need something different. It's always at Wash U okay to ask. And so that was a course that I put together with the English department chair around public humanities and podcasting, reran it for 12 other graduate students. They all got professional development stipends of $500 each. And so the real impetus of that was creating more professional development opportunities for graduate students to pursue different interests, but also with the goal that, and I know this is something that I've talked a lot about with my colleagues here, is there's already so much asked of you. And there's all these different benchmarks you have to hit in your program that finding ways to do activities or do professional development that kind of overlap with what you're already doing can be super helpful, especially because time is precious. And so that was kind of one of that was sort of the what I would say the idea and the inspiration behind that class. The other thing that I will just briefly mention, and then I'm gonna let Kyle ask me the next question, or please drop anything in the chat, is the Pivot 314 Fellowship, which the Center for Career Engagement just took over. So I was in the cohort for that 2023, so several years ago now. But essentially, what that fellowship offers is like really amazing professional development opportunities once a month. And then it's a funded internship over the summer that's approximately 10 hours. Some of these details might change a little bit, but the that was transformative in the sense that I, as a humanities person, got to meet a lot of PhD students in STEM, which I absolutely loved. Getting outside of my department, as great as my department is, I found incredibly rewarding. But then also the other people I met through that program. So these would be people who were responsible for running the program. And that was just a really cool way, not only to get to know other students, but also other staff at WashU who are I think sometimes overlooked as really, really valuable mentors. So I will stop there. Happy to, of course, later on during, more Q&A to tug on any of those threads. But those have been like the most fundamental and rewarding experiences that I've had the pleasure of working with here at WashU.
Well, and I feel like you're selling yourself short because there's been quite a few others, even in the relatively short time that I've been here. You spent, what was it, 1 or 2 months in Europe last semester on a fellowship as
That
well,
is
right?
true. Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
did. I did. Kyle speaks the truth. That was also another application. So kind of cobbling together money and resources, which some of you may have had to already do at WashU, or maybe you have experience in prior work. It was a combination of another grant that I applied for and emailing the organizer at Utrecht University in the Netherlands and saying, hey, I'm a grad student. Any chance you can waive this fee that was associated with the program, and she said yes. And so I was able to kind of uh, you know cobble the experience together and get it paid for. That opportunity, and I might be leading to maybe your next question, Kyle, around like how you find them, but that opportunity came out on LinkedIn. I figured I learned about it on LinkedIn. So sometimes there's weird places where these initiatives and programming lurk.
Yeah, that was kind of leading in.
I know.
So that's a perfect segue. Yeah. And like
Yeah.
where do you find a lot of these opportunities?
Yeah. So there's kind of like your usual suspects, which some of you might have been checking yourself. There's right the newsletters, subscribing to email newsletters on campus, which can tell you a lot about what's happening at WashU. I think sometimes it's a little bit more, not sometimes, I think often it's more difficult to know like what is out in the ether. So the grad school, the grad center offers a lot of workshops on like those resources. I'm gonna drop one of my favorites here in the Zoom for all of you. Let me make sure I don't just send it to Kyle. I send it to everyone. All right. So that's just like an kind of old-fashioned website that lists different resources and opportunities, and a lot of universities have them. WashU has a really cool like funding database that I think can be super helpful, especially for students in STEM fields. But I do have to plug a couple other things. I mentioned LinkedIn, and sometimes people groan. I get it. But in terms of just having a sense of the kind of the debates of what's happening in industry and even in academia, LinkedIn is super useful. And it's you can kind of you can control how much you get into that ecosystem, right? You don't have to completely build out a glowing LinkedIn. Although, if I'm not mistaken, Kyle has a workshop on LinkedIn coming up soon.
Yep, we're doing that next Thursday. So I was going to
Perfect.
plug that at the end of the workshop, but yeah, next Thursday on Med Campus Erlanger classroom, and we're going to be talking about LinkedIn.
Perfect. Go to that workshop. I think you're going to get some super valuable information because LinkedIn is something that a lot of advisors and PI, your PI might not use. But I've seen just as much mileage in academic life as I had in non-academic life. And then two other things really paying attention to what senior grad students are applying for, asking about their experiences, taking a look at their CV and resumes, seeing what awards or fellowships they've applied to. The same can also maybe be said of your advisor or PI or a postdoc, someone who is not that someone who is high up in the ranks couldn't have a useful information on their CV, but often if you're looking at people who maybe graduated a couple years before you, who are in your lab or are at the center that you're working for, their CV can be a great source of information. But really thinking about folks who are more senior in your program, and then maybe alumni as well. And then last but not least, there are professional organizations. If you are going to conferences, right, that's a professional organization. There's graduate student networking and events that can happen through there. The other thing you could think about if you know you don't want to go into academia is finding like the professional organization for if it's data science, you want to be a data scientist, what professional organization is that? And see about it might not be possible to get funding covered for that conference, but even getting a membership there speaks volumes. Those organizations might not necessarily have a lot of PhD students, especially if it's a kind of role that is a little bit unconventional for a PhD student to be interested in. So that again, it's kind of the same role as academic conferences, right? You're using it to build relationships and to get an understanding of the field. So that's something that I think can be easy to overlook because there's so much emphasis, and I understand, and rightly so, right? You got to attend these academic conferences, attend the conferences in your field, but thinking about professional organizations, especially if you are sure you do not want to be in academia and you want to go to industry.
Yeah. So we've talked, you mentioned this a little bit earlier about time being precious.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious how you find the time to apply for things. And I'm sure that there's even more stuff that there's not time to apply for. So how do you make that judgment call of where you put your energy and how you manage your time and your responsibilities?
Yeah, I this is a dilemma, I think, for us all. So I'll answer it in kind of two ways in terms of sort of what I do and then maybe my like overarching philosophy, which makes it sound far more official than it really is. But a couple just very concrete things that I do, and I imagine some of you have done this as well. It's like really having a calendar and blocking out that time. It's not very fun or sexy, but it's super helpful to have these kind of blocks of time on your calendar, and then you stick to it. Treat it like a dentist appointment. So if you have, just as an example, 2 hours every Tuesday morning that's dissertation writing time. If someone comes along and asks, "Oh, hey, can you do this at this time?" No, 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 you really can't. So really holding true to that, and it's not easy. Practice makes perfect in that sense. Um, and then I would say the other thing that I do is I have a folder in my inbox that is basically just a list of opportunities that I've said no to. And not necessarily like people have come to me with these opportunities. It's just opportunities that I've come across in my inbox from there's emails and just things kind of floating around. I might look at it and think, you know what, can't do it. And then I put it in the I said no folder. And then periodically I kind of review it and I remind myself life is still okay, even though I didn't apply to all of these opportunities, right? I think saying no can be very, very difficult. And so that's like a really good reminder that you're still okay. You might have turned down these things or not pursued these things or not applied for these things, but now you can really focus on these other elements. And that gets me to kind of like my overarching philosophy. There's a lot of metaphors for this. Like the most commonly used ones in, this is used a lot for dissertation writing, thinking about it like a marathon, not a sprint. Some of my other favorites are if you're into sourdough, like not rushing the sourdough process, like it's little increments, right? You can't rush that. Or if you've learned an instrument, it's the same kind of concept. Like these things don't happen overnight. It's incremental progress kind of put into sort of bite-sized chunks as opposed to I'm going to spend all Saturday applying to jobs. Now, sometimes that might be the situation you find yourself in. However, if you can kind of uh, do the best you can to not find yourself in that situation all of the time, ideally that'll help with the balancing. Um, but it's definitely an ongoing debate and battle, and I have not yet mastered it myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really curious too how you handle, because you said for everything you've gotten, there's five things that you didn't get, and I'm curious how you
Yeah.
handle that, because that was kind of for myself when I was in graduate school. The point when I realized that I didn't want to be in academia was when I was trying to submit like an article, the first time I was trying to submit an article,
Hmm.
and couldn't get past even just the desk rejections. And I was like, this is brutal and I don't like it.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that? How do you handle that?
Yeah, no, I don't think it gets easier. It's super valid. I think what's really challenging with academic work, and this might be apparent to those of you who have had jobs like outside of academia, or if you have even like done like an internship, for example, is there's a lot that you do in the background that never sees the light of day. So in terms of tracking progress and having kind of those little dopamine hits of, oh, I've done this or I've accomplished this, it's a lot of working in the background and for every gosh, I don't know. For every 100 hours you maybe spend in the lab, you might have 10 hours. I'm spitballing here. I'm not a scientist, so you can correct me, but you might have 10 hours that are really giving you something. The equivalent for my discipline would be for every 50 pages I write, 10, 15 might be good. The rest you have to kind of chuck more or less. You can get a little bit more efficient, but that's kind of the process of like writing a dissertation in the humanities. So all that to say, I think that rejection can hurt even more because it's like you have all this unseen labor and there's these few moments where you can get kind of that validation which you deserve for all of the hard work and it keeps kind of coming back to hit you in the face. I don't have a foolproof method. There are a couple suggestions. It's just to continue to apply and apply. And for some people, that lessens the sting. That hasn't necessarily been my experience. What has helped me a little bit is being on the other side of it. So, in a very different context, I'm an editor at a small little poetry journal. We get a ton of poetry submissions. We talk about all of them. And the ones that we're rejecting so often come down to it has nothing to do with the person's talent uh, or even interested in the poem. Sometimes these poems are super interesting. It comes down to fit. It comes down to like maybe one of us is grumpy. It comes down to space. It comes down to, oh, we've already had 10 poems that talk about birds. We really can't have an 11. So it's arbitrary, I guess is my point. And so if there, my, I guess an action item would be if it's relevant to you, if it's a good career opportunity for you, trying to see what the other side of this process looks like at a journal or something kind of low stakes can at least help you hold on to, okay, I know there's so much that goes into this that has nothing to do with like my ability. And that can kind of be I don't want to say it's a panacea, but it's a nice North Star to help ease the sting a little bit. But yeah, I think academia is a very unique beast. The way reward and incentives work outside of academia is so different. And understand, and when I say academia, I'm talking about being a professor, right? There's plenty of careers in academia that aren't being a professor, but like truly like the professorial tenure track route is an incredibly brutal one.
I appreciate you saying that, highlighting that there are those things that happen that we never really see, even like those folks never see some of the work we do, but we also never see some of like the what goes into the decision making. There
Yeah.
was I won't name names here, but there was a point where there was a university I really, really wanted to work at. And I kept applying to jobs there, jobs that I thought I was really, really well qualified for, and I kept getting rejected without even like an interview.
Hmm.
And it was wild to me. And I
Yeah.
had cause like years later to meet one of the hiring managers for one of those jobs I'd applied for. And I just happened to mention, that I had applied
Yeah.
and, but, never, like obviously didn't get it. And they gave me this look and they were like, oh my God, HR is so difficult to work with. And they reject so many applicants before I ever even get to see them.
Yeah.
Um, so, you never know what part of the process might have something that just got nothing to do with you coming up into it.
That's
So
such a great example. I'm really glad you shared that because I do think that is more it is the norm and not the exception that there's all these other variables that are outside of your control. So yeah, that's a great example.
and Emily, I love that there. Yeah, we
Mhm.
it's a rite of passage.
All right.
You
Yes,
get the
yes.
desk rejection.
If you aren't getting rejected, you aren't doing it right. I've
Yeah.
heard that too. Hard to swallow sometimes, but I'm like, yeah, just keep aiming for rejection, I guess. Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, we've danced around this somewhat, but we know as just career coaches, but also from what you're sharing that like the connections that you make are super important, the people that
Yeah.
you meet and stuff. So I was wondering if you could share your approach to networking and how you build those professional connections.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Kyle, in May, everyone offered great workshops on networking. We had one the end of December that I think was fantastic. So, especially for those of you who are daunted by it or annoyed by it or don't want to hear the word networking at all, um, just going to like one of those sessions I think can be super valuable and kind of breaking down the very understandable hesitancy folks have about it. Um, I I really view, or I try to kind of take the word networking and think and kind of replace it with the idea of just uh, building and maintaining relationships and just kind of doing that authentically and organically. And I'll talk about like what that means and acknowledging that these things take time and are kind of they're built over years, right? Um, so to that end, like at a resource at a university like WashU, there's plenty of kind of built-in spaces to get to know other people that don't have the like dreaded come here and network and like balance your glass of wine if you drink with like your canapé and you got a name tag and like that kind of forced interaction. So you can avoid those things entirely because there's a lot of ways just to get to know other people. And if it feels overwhelming, just starting within your department. For example, I'm a sixth year. I don't really know many of the first years, and I realize that depends on every discipline, right? And so trying to kind of get to know folks you don't know in your department is like a super easy and fun and rewarding first step. For those of you though who I know might be in like a DBBS is one thing, but like really small PhD programs where it might just be you and one other person in your cohort, or you might be a cohort of one, totally understandable that you'll want kind of a sense of community. And there's a couple kind of, thoughts that I have around this. So one thing is what's a space or what's something you can do on campus that isn't a huge amount of time, but that can be rewarding. And I always like to plug, they don't pay me to do this, but I really like to plug advisory board councils and a couple examples like the Center for Career Engagement, we have one, but the Center for Teaching and Learning has one. The library has one that comes with like a small stipend that I will drop in the chat here. And these are opportunities to have a better understanding of like what's happening on campus, but also to get to know other people that you'll see like again and again. And you're kind of working on a task with them. And I think a lot of relationship building is sort of around like something that's task oriented or team oriented and through seeing that person or that group of people multiple times. Advisory boards are great because you depends on the board, but you might meet once a month. So that's one thing. The other thing is show up for your peers when they're doing cool stuff. I don't know how else to say it, but especially in the humanities, people are doing poetry readings, they're doing stuff on archiving, they're doing stuff with the Center for the Environment. Go to their stuff, be a face in the crowd. You don't have to ask a question, but just I think that practice of us showing up for each other is like super important. And it doesn't have to be, it's an hour out of the day, right? Like acknowledging that everyone's super busy. But that way, like if you when you need someone to like show up for stuff that you're doing, you have a group and you have a community that's interested in kind of helping each other out. I think grad students, we struggle with publicizing ourselves. It feels kind of yeah, I think we often self-reject, we sell ourselves short, but your friends or people at an event who are celebrating stuff you do won't do that for, they will support you. And so that's kind of the other piece is just go to events that look interesting, show up for peers that you have, show up for junior faculty, show up for staff, like really think of yourself as an advocate. And the networking piece kind of is running in the background, but then it's not your main quest. And I think when it's not your main quest, when it's kind of in your peripheral, it can be rewarding and not super daunting. Oh, perfect. I see another one on the Center for Human Rights. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. That's a fantastic example as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. The community kind of building aspect, I think, is the part that gets lost in a lot of what we think about with networking.
Yes.
Um, but this may be a kind of specific one, but this is something I've come across myself and working with
Yeah.
many of you folks is like how do you decide who you're going to kind of make that effort with and go out
Mhm.
to like meet because you know so many of the places or events we go to, like you can go to a conference and network, but a conference will have like hundreds of attendees. And I think it's very easy to get overwhelmed, or it is for me to get
Sure.
overwhelmed in looking at like, oh my goodness, there's like 50 people I could, have a great conversation with, but I only have like so many days to be able to do this. So how do you kind of navigate that decision-making process?
Yeah, like who to get to know, who to connect with. And I mean, I've already kind of talked a lot about what you can do at Wash U. So we can maybe, yeah, let's shift the focus. Let's think about the conferences that you're going to or interviewing that you might be doing. Because even if you don't get the job, you don't necessarily it's not that the person on the committee is going to be your best friend, but 10 years down the line, that person might move to another position. You just never know where people are going to wind up, especially when we're thinking about the long term game. But of course, a lot of this is like short term strategies. So conferences, I think we hear a lot of like go to conferences, go to conferences. It's like, okay, cool. But like what does that actually look like? What does that mean? You can absolutely go to too many conferences. There's a lot of pressure, and I think, you know, you, your PI and your advisor are just like looking out for you. This is my personal experience, and if anyone has like kind of thoughts around conference networking in particular, like please drop in the chat, is it's useful and this is something you're going to constantly be kind of maybe tweaking throughout your career, especially if you stay in academia as a professor or lecturer or whatnot, to go to the same conference over a series of years. So what I was not told, or maybe I just didn't hear it, it's very possible I was told this, but I did not hear it at the time, was it's not the amount of conferences. It's not even going to a lot of different conferences. It's the consistency of two or three. And so that would be like the big one in your field. For humanities, it's MLA, Modern Language Association. But then maybe, the conference that caters to your subfield. So for me, that would be the American Literature Association. And prioritizing those and going to those routinely. A couple things will happen. One, you're going to be kind of seeing roughly the same people. And so that helps to what you were talking about, Kyle, where it's like you see 50 people doing really cool things, ranging from first year PhD students to endowed professors. Like, how do you even cut into that? The second is that sets you up. to, if you present a paper, great. If you don't, that's totally fine. To kind of build out collaborations with other people that you can, propose a panel or propose a workshop, propose a, I know this is very field dependent, but propose a kind of like a poster board activity as well. That becomes a little bit easier when you've kind of honed in on a cup, two to three, roughly. That's just a number that I'm eyeballing, but you should totally talk to your advisor and or your PI and what other grad students say about conferences, and then just be very strategic. So that's kind of, I know that's a very kind of broad thought. When it comes to conferences itself, I think it's easiest, of course, to get to know other PhD students and collaborate with other PhD students. I volunteered at MLA last year. I struck up a conversation with another volunteer. We got along. We co-proposed a panel. We just ran the panel here at MLA this past year, and that was just through like a basic conversation. Volunteering is a great way because it kind of gives you a task. Again, it's like that idea of the networking being in the peripheral, going to the book fair and like talking to people. That's great because you have like the books in front of you. I realize this is more humanities focused, so apologies to my STEM friends, but you have the book in front of you. You can kind of strike up a conversation. Anything that is not standing in a room with a glass of wine and a hello, my name is, I think can really unlock those moments. And then in terms of thinking about who to network with, I think that would also depend on where you are in the program. So whether, if you're just starting out versus fifth or sixth year in your program, it it would that would kind of be shaping your who you're wanting to get to know better. And we can talk more about that later. I don't wanna belabor the point, but those are kinds of my hot takes on conferences, I guess.
I think that's great. And the whole running in the background piece is I think a great way of kind of approaching it because I think sometimes we're inclined to think of networking as something that we start doing when we're looking for a job. And
Right.
honestly, it's sort of a thing that should be happening while, we are going about all of our other work that
Yeah.
then kind of kicks in maybe a little bit more once the time comes to be looking for opportunities and jobs and stuff. So
Yeah, I
I think
think that's
that's great
exactly
advice.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and thank you, Juana, for yeah,
Mhm.
seconding that. Definitely there is a thing as too many conferences. Um, so just, out of curiosity and just to kind of share with everyone, what at this point, what are your career goals and what are some of the things that you've started doing or been doing, especially this like last year of your program to set yourself up for that like success and for that post grad life?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm on the job market, and when I say I'm on the job market, I'm doing kind of what is like a tandem search. So I'm both applying to jobs uh, within academia. So I'm thinking about administration, although I haven't started applying to those yet. I've been applying to jobs that are tenure track professor jobs. In my field in particular, there are right now, just in this year of 2026, a lot of job postings are focused right now on creative writing or like first year writing programs. So I've seen a lot of those opportunities. And so what's been really interesting from like the English literature perspective is this idea that a lot of the jobs are thinking about first year student experience, a lot of teaching. In terms of more research focused jobs, there's a few out there. A few are ones we'll say, but there aren't a ton. And the job market, of course, is under a lot of pressure, as I'm sure you all are aware, with budget cuts and whatnot. Something I have seen more frequently is postings being explicit about whether or not they can sponsor visas for international students. So I'm glad to see that language being included first and foremost in the job posting. The kind of bad news I have there is the vast majority that I have seen are saying that they cannot sponsor. However, hope, that saves a little bit of time. In terms of preparation, nothing prepares you for this, but there's great workshops at the Center for Career Engagement that can kind of help with it. I think a lot there's definitely distinct differences between going for like a tenure track professor job and other jobs, but I do think there's also some overlap in terms of thinking about these genres, these weird genres that you're writing in the cover letter, the resume, the CV. Um, I have also done like a mock interview with my advisor, which is something that the CCE also does and is open, to all of you, but even like a mock interview with a friend. Using our resource Big Interview is super helpful, especially for Zoom interviews, because it won't just, it's a, I'm gonna probably not do it justice, but it's basically a service that will not only track the content, but also like your body language and quote unquote eye contact. So that's something that we have that I highly recommend you practice with. And really it's just practicing and applying strategically. So here's where you might hear different kinds of advice. Overwhelmingly, the advice that I've heard is apply for everything. That's not what I've been doing, um, because the amount of kind of tailoring is a lot. There's a lot of tailoring that has to go into kind of like postdocs or these academic positions of the professoriate. But if you have your documents ready to go, you can kind of in theory apply to everything, but it's a lot of time. And so I think what I'll end my comment here with is um, and maybe some of you have already been told this, that you might go on the job market a couple times, that postdocs in the humanities are becoming more the norm. I know for the sciences, that's definitely been kind of baked into it, but postdocs for humanities is a little bit newer. So yeah, you'll be on the market. You were told so potentially several years. The market's going to look different every year, especially with things being kind of in flux. And it really is a full-time job. If you remember whatever you were doing when you were applying to grad school, which I think has some similarities here, right? That's what this is, but you're also trying to finish your dissertation simultaneously. So drafting these materials as early as you can, just so you have some like raw stuff to work with, I think can take some of that pressure off. And come talk to us. We're happy to just, listen to how it's going, particularly if you have maybe a more challenging relationship with your advisor or PI. I think the CCE can be a really like great neutral space to kind of work out some of the very understandable highs and lows of this process.
Yeah, we don't come into this like with pre-existing ideas about what you all should be doing. We're
Yes.
just here to support you. So, um, well, I wanted to leave like time here. Does anyone have any questions for Laura? Please, you feel free to unmute or drop in the chat any questions or follow-ups you have. Nope, nothing.
I have a quick question of
Yeah.
Laura. Thank you so much for sharing. And as we know, there will be the Korean Expo happening next month.
Hmm.
And since you are also on the job market, I'm wondering, do you already have started preparing for it? And what would be your tips for that?
That's a great question around the Career Expo, and I might kick it to May and Kyle in terms of kind of the preparatory workshops or opportunities we would have. I won't be going to the Career Expo this spring. I've gone in years past and I have found it like super helpful. The reason is not because it's not of interest or anything like that, but it's I've kind of identified I have like geographical considerations and I have my partner to think about. And so those are kind of things that I'm weighing. Um, but in addition to the programming and kind of preparation that May and Kyle are going to talk about, I think a career expo is a really great space. This gets back to what we were talking about a little bit before, is just to kind of practice. Perfect, May, for dropping. Thank you for dropping that in the chat. Just to really practice in a low stakes environment, talking with recruiters. And so it's definitely something that can be a little bit daunting. Although our one in the spring is a little bit smaller than our one in the fall, but it's really, I think if you think of it as a space to practice, to have those conversations, it's not relationship building necessarily. It can be, it absolutely can be, but it's really, if you think about it in the sense of, it can be useful if you don't know what's out there at all. So that's one scenario. Not sure what's out there, not sure who's recruiting, who's interested in PhD students. Great. Like, Wash, you've done the hard work of bringing these people to you. That's fantastic. And just kind of using it as like a gathering data mission. The other and these aren't exhaustive examples that I'm giving. The other way it can be super useful is if there is um, a company that's going to be there that you know you're like, this is my dream, then to really like target that company or that booth. But there's not like a wrong way to really approach it, but those are kind of the two most dominant ways I can think about. But I would be happy to hear more like what Kyle or May might think about the Career Expo in particular.
I think you're exactly right that like if there's a company that you really are interested in, it's a great way to make a connection with that company. Um, I think if you're not entirely certain, if you don't, if you're not familiar with the companies or you're not sure exactly, what job you're gunning for, which is understandable because
Mm.
outside of academia, the number of job titles is kind of insane, right? Like we have like three in the tenure track, assistant, associate, and full professor. And then everywhere else you'll get like these crazy titles that you've never heard of. So it can be a good way to learn about some of those. I think that it's also a really great opportunity to practice your elevator pitch,
Hmm.
that like kind of brief introduction of who you are, what your skills are, and what you're looking for. And with the vast majority of, people that you might meet at a career expo or fair, you might give that elevator pitch and they might be like, oh, that's cool. I don't necessarily know if I have anyone or anything going on at my company, but you might meet people who do, and you get more confident giving that pitch when we're talking with someone who you definitely know has like opportunities for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with what you said. If you want to find a job at Career Expo, then I would say it's quite unlikely. Because Career Expo are mainly many of the employers are here for hiring undergraduate students. That being said, there are some opportunities for PhDs and postdocs, but they're not a whole lot. But Career Expo is a great opportunity for you to learn about the different industries, make some connections, practice your pitches, as they all said. So still have value, but it's not for everyone. So do some homework, and you're welcome to join the prep session to learn more how to do the preparation.
Yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat there, May. Um,
It's a great question. Thank you, Emily.
we have other questions for Laura or May or myself too. I mean, we're all here.
I have just one question, Laura. You
Yes.
mentioned securing those professional development opportunities is really um, a process, right?
Yes.
Um, my question is really just on average, can
Mm,
you give the people here some idea? How many hours do you put on professional development? Just roughly. I know every week is different, or maybe by
yeah.
month. So
Yeah.
let's help people to know, um, you know, whether they may want to allocate a little bit more time in their professional development.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, May. And I love the quantitative data emphasis of that question. I do think that is super, super important. Um, I'll start with saying to the degree that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too is great, right? So professional development can also be related to coursework in some way or a teaching job you have, being a TA in some way. Like when you can create opportunities for overlap, yes, everybody wins. Now, I realize that's not necessarily the case. I know here at the CCE, I think the number May is like tw 10 or 20% of your time on professional development. Am I ballparking that?
That's what we
That's what
recommend.
we
Mhm.
recommend. I will co-sign on that. And I will also say that I'm an example of someone who has spent, I'll just be very honest, maybe too much time on professional development or things that run parallel or that are adjacent to my dissertation. I don't have any regrets in that sense because all of that work would makes me and would make you a really great faculty member. Faculty need people who know how to be administrators. They need leaders. They need go-getters. They need individuals who know how to work across disciplines. So it's not necessarily time. I don't want to say it's time that you're using well, regardless of where you want to wind up or where you hope to wind up. If I'm gonna get down the nitty-gritty and give you like a rough estimate, I I mean, if you treat PhD like a job, 40, 50-hour work week, let's be real, it's more like 60, but I'm just trying to be aspirational here. I am probably roughly, it's depending on what I'm up to, at least 10 hours a week, more or less. And that just kind of fluctuates. I use the summer a lot to kind of dial up on those things. Um, but it is tricky, and I have found it's hard to do both well at the same time. And so there might be seasons. There might be a couple weeks where you're like, I'm in dissertation mode. I'm doing my qualifying exams. That's all I'm gonna do. Do that. Focus on that. Because that's the beauty of a PhD program is that in-depth focus and kind of just really going deep. That's I think, such an asset. But then there might be, other weeks where you're able to kind of get in a little bit more professional development. So hopefully that was numerical enough.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I guess I asked this question is really want we all here kind of be intentional in this process. Professional development is part of the experience, part of the education we have in WashU, part of the training we have in WashU. And I really agree with your point. If we can find overlapping area between your research and also professional development opportunities, that would be really a win here. Go back to Kyle. Yeah. Thank you, Laura.
I think we're losing folks as we wrap up the
Yeah.
session here, but any final, did anyone have a final question for Laura? Nope. Okay. Well, Laura, I want to really thank you for taking
Of
this time with
course.
us.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you for attending. Laura is, like we said, a peer career coach with us, so you can set up appointments, a one-on-one appointment with her if you'd like to get, further advice or have other questions. And you can also set up appointments with me or May as well. Um, so thank you all very much. Hope to see you next week at our LinkedIn workshop. Like I said, that'll be on Med Campus in the Erlanger classroom, 4 to 5:30 next Thursday.
Yes,
But
sounds
thank you all
good.
for coming.
Yes, thank you everyone and
Thank
good
you
luck
so
with your
much.
week.